If we could find the right piece of land and build them some really nice places.
Where would those pieces of land be?
Well, they could be in Jordan and they could be in Egypt.
Settlers have been trying to erase the indigenous for a very long time, and they've developed lots of tools for the toolbox. War, disease, famine, settlements, re-education camps. But there's one in particular that's been on my mind: forcible transfer.
And you'd have people living in a place that could be very beautiful.
It's interesting because if you survive the move, you're still alive. You carry with you your memories and you fight to pass them down to your children and them to theirs.
This is Cabri Forest.
But there's something else that dies. Something bigger and older than any individual life or home left behind. The essence of a people. So what exactly gets lost when you uproot a people? If you like our work and want to help us continue telling stories like this, you can become a paid member of our Patreon. Now back to the video. From the moment I saw this painting, I was mesmerized. Mostly by her hands. They're big and strong, and she carries all those oranges effortlessly, like her hands were made for it. She feels really familiar, and looks so out of place. It's called The Immigrant by Palestinian artist Sleiman Mansour. I first saw it in Bethlehem in 2018, on my trip to Palestine. I was there alone, going through the grief and honor of being back on our land, not just for myself, but for the whole family. Because I was the first person able to actually go back. So I logged everything. Looking through all the pictures now, it's mostly of the land. Especially when I got to what used to be our village, Al-Kabri. It's on the outskirts of Akka, in the north of occupied Palestine. Our village is one of over 500 Palestinian towns and villages that were destroyed when Zionist militias ethnically cleansed Palestine. I took lots of pictures for my family to see, and for myself.
It's like we never existed.
To try to hold on to it. To this plot of earth that, to Israelis, is now a highway, a national forest, and a kibbutz. But to me, to us, this was home for, as far as we can trace it, a very long time.
We were driving through the kibbutz that they built, and you should see the trees that they have. I swear to God, a pomegranate tree with the biggest, fattest, ripest, most red pomegranate. The color is so vibrant, so healthy.
I asked my family what we used to grow on our land besides tobacco, which I knew. Vegetables, fruits, oranges, lemons, and grapes. It wasn't easy to get the information.
You don't understand how gorgeous it is here.
My dad reached out to his cousin, who asked his uncle, who also lived in the village. I wonder how much else we lost that I don't even know to ask about. See, when a people are uprooted, they may have survived, they may be alive, but there's something invaluable that can die. Something immaterial and bigger than any individual life. And it's this thing that explains what it means to be indigenous. I realized this when I was learning about another indigenous people halfway across the world. They called it Turtle Island, and for thousands of years it was home to millions of Native Americans. In the Pacific Northwest, abundant forests and waterways created cultures centered on fishing and forestry, like the Tlingit. Tlingit speakers don't say left or right, they say toward the water or toward the mountains. One ancient narrative they tell is of Salmon Boy, a story that speaks to how salmon, a central part of their sustenance and culture, feel, make choices, and respond to human actions. In the Great Plains, bison herding was the main way of life for tribes like the Lakota. So life followed the herds and was nomadic. Buffalo were central to survival, culture, and spirituality.
They clothed us, they fed us, they gave us inner strength to carry on.
The buffalo adopted the Indian, the Lakota, as his younger brother.
And in the southeast, fertile lands allowed for large-scale agriculture. This area was home to the Cherokee, who, along with others, used complex irrigation systems to grow the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, grown together in a sustainable system where each plant supported the other. They also, along with many other tribes across North America, practiced controlled burning, which would clear undergrowth and make space for edible plants and medicinal herbs. This maintained healthy forests and reduced wildfires.
Work with nature, expand habitat, decenter humans, and design for perpetuity.
And there's way more. Before the first arrival of settlers, around 250 distinct languages were spoken. And each of these languages is inseparable from the land it comes from. The mountains, rivers, forests, and creatures of every region are woven into the language, stories, ceremonies, and way of life of the people who live there, and are considered animate beings. Losing access to this land would mean losing access to this language, which is losing an entire system of knowledge and spiritual connection. Unfortunately, that would come to happen for many Native American tribes, when settlers arrived with a very different philosophy towards the land.
They often mislabeled them as virgin land or wilderness instead of what they really were, living heirlooms, thousands of years in the making.
Settlers to the New World saw this land not as a living, breathing being, but as a blank canvas, a 2D backdrop to carve out a new civilizational fantasy. They did a lot to clear the natives: massacres, disease, broken treaties, but we're looking at forcible transfer. The most famous example comes from the southeast. It's known as the Trail of Tears. It's when the US government forcibly removed thousands of indigenous people from their ancestral lands in the 1830s. People were marched at gunpoint with little food and poor shelter for hundreds of miles in extreme weather.
Sick and feeble, many near death. One woman was carrying her youngest child who was dying in her arms.
Those that survived the journey made it to a radically different terrain: Oklahoma. Thousands of years of self-sufficiency, language, science, medicine, diet, spirituality, all tethered to the land, suddenly suspended from the reality they're based on. In this new reality, resources weren't as abundant, and communities were split up. Previously self-sufficient and environmentally sustainable tribes became dependent on US government rations. Cut off from their sacred sites, ceremonies and spiritual practices began fading away. And they cut them off from one another. Children were sent to boarding schools where, separated from their families, they were forcibly assimilated into white Euro-American culture. Yes, they were alive, but something else was being killed. Inherited knowledge, science refined over generations, a responsibility to tend to the plants and animals of a region, a sense of collective self, totally uprooted. Things that define a culture and a people are learned organically, from just existing in your community on your land. Removing the land removes the space for that exchange, and splitting up communities makes trying to collect that knowledge to save it so much harder. I wonder what words we had in our dialect that we lost to the Nakba, what rituals around land we would perform, what creatures we tended to. I'm sure it's out there somewhere or in someone. Thankfully, they didn't manage to expel us all.
أتذكر هذا الشارع اللي أكل من جريرات وأنا رايح على المدرسة في مدرسة الكابري أنا تعلمت. كنا عايشين مش بيقولوا مهد عيسى يا أخي، إحنا كنا عايشين في الجنة في مهد عيسى صدقني. إن اكتفاء ذاتي، جماعة فلاحين على قدنا عايشين بأرضنا مبسوطين.
But they expelled plenty. Just like Turtle Island, with tribes changing as the land does, Palestine's diverse terrain is home to diverse, old relationships to the land. That's why so many of our symbols are from the land. The sabr, the date, the figs, the grapes, the watermelon, the orange, za'atar, and of course, the olive tree. Every year after the first rainfall of October, it's harvesting season. Families gather to pick trees that are hundreds of years old, on groves passed down from generation to generation.
When you ask them, for example, how do you think your olive yield is going to be this year? Their answer is always about, depends on my service. They believe they are serving the tree. And I know this all sounds so romantic in some way, but actually it's still in the language. They call it service. It is a relationship based on reciprocity rather than one person using the soil and abusing the soil to get the crop they want.
The land finds its way into Palestinian clothing too. The embroidery, or tatriz, on women's clothing would reflect the area, town, or village of the person wearing it and the natural landscape of every region. And the land is central in our music and our dance. And despite the differences from place to place, Palestinians have always been in communication with one another, trading and exchanging, traveling, gathering for ceremonies and festivals, until they came.
The colonists' aggressive attitude towards the native peasants stemmed from their anger towards those who reminded them that there is still another people in the land of Israel that have been living there and does not intend to leave.
They say it was a land without a people for a people without a land, and that they made the desert bloom. In 1948, Zionist militias methodically ethnically cleansed Palestine for Zionist settlement, leading to the expulsion of 750,000 Palestinians from their homes. We call this the Nakba. The new reality was a fragmented Palestine carved into 4 new colonial geographies: the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Jerusalem, and the 48 territories, what they call Israel. That's where our village was. Some Palestinians were able to remain, but many were effectively transferred to refugee camps both in these new territories and in neighboring countries like Jordan and Lebanon. My maternal grandmother was in the womb when her father was killed, the first martyr from our village, and her mother left on foot, alone, pregnant, and with 4 other children, to Lebanon. She made it to a camp called Burj al-Barajne, where my grandmother would be born and raised, and would eventually meet my grandfather. My paternal grandparents were from the same village. They left to Burj al-Barajne too. It's one of 12 Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon that are still around today.
The camera's not even doing it justice, I swear to God.
I think it's hard to gather information about what we lost in Palestine because the trauma didn't end with leaving El-Kabri. It continued in Lebanon.
Their right to work and own property are limited by Lebanese law.
Life in Lebanon for Palestinian refugees was not easy. They left behind their property and their wealth and their lives to start from scratch in a new place, where they were and still are barred from working in 39 different fields, including law, engineering, and medicine.
اللي بعتذر منك ما مشغل فلسطينية. قلت له بس بدي أسألك سؤال إنه أنت بمراءك خلقت لبناني يعني بمراءك أنت خلقت لبناني وأنا خلقت فلسطيني؟ قال لي مش من عنا الوزارة ما بتقبل تشغل فلسطيني.
And then in 1975, there was the Lebanese Civil War.
The toll of human life is horrifying,
which started when Lebanese phalangist militias ambushed a bus carrying Palestinian civilians, killing 27 people.
When Jordan expelled the Palestinian guerrillas in 1970, many of them moved into Lebanon, from whose southern border they could stage raids against Israel.
We are against the Palestinian because we think that the whole problem is the Palestinian. We have 450,000 Palestinians in Lebanon. This is our problem.
The war lasted 15 years and saw thousands of Palestinians massacred.
The ruins of a Palestinian refugee camp on the outskirts of Beirut. The immensity of the crime shocked the world. The killers, members of a Lebanese rightist militia, got away as easily as they had arrived. To do so, they had to pass through Israeli lines.
During the war, Israel invaded Lebanon, overseeing massacres and bombing campaigns. My aunt Buran was killed when Israel bombed the bus she was on in 1982.
That's it.
What's been passed down to me about El-Kabri is factual. What we grew, who our neighbors were, how we lived. But there's information I crave that I'm not sure survived in our family. How did we tend to these plants? When did we harvest? What did we call a specific bud? What plants did we use medicinally? Like most Palestinian refugees, they left in a hurry with their keys in their pockets, expecting to come back. I don't think they had the time or luxury to pause and collect these tidbits in the middle of more unfolding trauma. Thankfully, not all of us were transferred. Many remained and continue to keep these traditions alive and are working on preserving and reviving them for future generations. But Israel continues to try to forcibly remove Palestinians from their land, either explicitly
to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. President Trump is taking it to a much higher level.
or by making life so unlivable that Palestinians might voluntarily leave.
Families on the move, just some of the tens of thousands of Palestinians whom Israeli soldiers have forced from their homes in the occupied West Bank.
What they did to Gaza, they're now doing to us.
In the West Bank, it looks like home demolitions, land seizures, tearing up roads, denying electricity, denying water. And there's a particular terror reserved for Palestinian shepherds and farmers, still deeply rooted in the land. And in Gaza, getting people to voluntarily leave looks like maintaining a suffocating, oppressive siege, where at one point, Israel even controlled how many calories made it in. And of course, indiscriminately decimating the strip. Its people, its infrastructure, and its land. The orchards, farms, trees, soil, groundwater, sea, and air were all directly targeted to make Gaza unlivable, to break the connection to the land by breaking the land.
شجر الزيتون هذا كله هان مات تعرض لضربة قوية.
It wasn't just a genocide, it was also ecocide.
How many olive trees did you have?
4,500.
And how many of them did Israel destroy during this genocide?
All.
Is this the first time that Israel has destroyed your olive groves?
No, the fourth time.
But in the face of all this violence and terror, Palestinians remain. And not only do they remain, they return.
Started to smell like Gaza.
الله يرحم حامد يا أمه، الله يرحمه، كان هو اللي بيستقبلنا أول واحد يا أمه. بسيبها وبطلع، لا بموت بغزة وأنا بسيبها. بوس ترابها قبل ما تروح، بوس ترابها.
It's in these situations that the meaning of indigeneity is on full display. Despite having protections not afforded to Palestinians, in the face of danger, the settler flees because there's no tether to the land. That's why they say things like this.
Palestinians say they don't want to leave.
I don't know how they could want to stay. It's a demolition site.
The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative.
Because to the settler, a good life is possible on any land. Land is just a place to live, a backdrop. It might have some excavated ideological story, but there's no relationship, no roots to keep them settled. That's why when they came to Palestine, they planted thousands of pine trees over the remnants of Palestinian villages. Trees for cover, trees for decoration, a prop. And why from when they arrived to this day, they don't seem to have difficulty burning and uprooting olive trees that are hundreds of years old. According to an Iroquois story of creation, the world was made when Sky Woman fell from above and was saved by the animals below. The geese caught her, the turtle carried her, and the muskrat dove to the bottom of the sea to bring her mud that she would use to make land. She spread the mud across the turtle's back and began to sing and dance in appreciation. And as she did, the land grew and grew from a smear of mud to what we know as the earth. It's why they call North America Turtle Island. The story speaks to a central philosophy in their culture, that the land is not our property, isn't ours to own. It welcomed us, saved us, and we feed it in return. It reminds me of how in Arabic we say أصحاب الأرض, which literally translates to friends of the land.
سامحنا لأن إحنا ما إحناش قادرين نحافظ عليك
Indigeneity doesn't just mean to live on a land for ages. If that were the case, settlers would eventually become indigenous too, and those forcibly transferred would stop being indigenous. To be indigenous means to be part of the land, part of its ecosystem, its tending, its caretaking. It's a responsibility and connection and inherited knowledge that you can't know in a lifetime. So when you remove people from their land and drop them somewhere foreign to them, you have severed the continuity of this ancient knowledge.
And our elders have told us that our job is to remember, to remember.
Unfortunately, some of it gets lost forever. But the wound this removal leaves, and the need to keep the connection alive, will always remain.
Shah means I am still here.
هاي رسالة من ستي اللي مواليد 1922 لترامب اللي بده يهجرنا. ما غصب عنك يا ستي بدهم يطلعونا.
ريت روحها تطلع. احنا ثابتين في الأرض زي الزيتون.
Thank you, President. I address you today with a sense of foreboding that words can hardly capture. I no longer know what more can be said. 14 months ago, I warned that this genocide marked an escalatory stage of a long-standing settler colonial project over Asia, one that has targeted the Palestinian people for over 7 decades. And now, it is happening, and we must stop it. The situation in the occupied Palestinian territory is apocalyptic. In Gaza, people continue to endure suffering beyond imagination. Israel is responsible for one of the cruelest genocides in modern history. Official figures count over 200,000 killed or injured. Leading health experts estimate that true toll is far higher. As the cost to the Palestinian people grows, Israel has dismantled the last function of the UN in Gaza, humanitarian aid. Its so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is nothing else than a death trap, engineered to kill or force the flight of a starved, bombarded, emaciated population marked for elimination. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, Palestinians continue to face the largest wave of forced displacement since 1967. Nearly 1,000 have been killed, 10,000 injured, 10,000 detained, many tortured, while armed settlers rampage and 900 checkpoints and other obstacles choke daily life. As Palestinians are abandoned to their fate, I must ask you, those of you with a diplomatic presence in the occupied Palestinian territory, what do your colleagues report? What is your presence for, if not to confirm what I'm saying and act to stop it in accordance with international law? At the same time, since October 2023, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange has soared by 213% in US dollars, amassing 225.7 billion US dollars in market gains, including 67.8 billion in the last month alone. One people enriched, one people erased. Israel has used the genocide as an opportunity to test new weapons, customized surveillance, lethal drones, radar systems, and other unmanned technology to exterminate a population without restraint. While Elbit Systems wins Israeli Ministry of Defense Award for Innovation, Lockheed Martin and the global web of 1,650 other companies benefit from Israel flying the F-35 fighter jets for the first time in beast mode, carrying 4 times the ordnance up to 22,000 pounds than when operating in stealth mode. It is its very defenselessness that has made the people and the land of Palestine an ideal laboratory for the Israeli military-industrial complex. The forever occupation has provided an optimal testing ground for arms manufacturers and big tech with little oversight and zero accountability, while investors, private and public institutions have profited handsomely. I once thought the problem was ignorance, a lack of understanding about Palestine and its history. Later, I saw the ideology at play, the deep political affinity many states and elites hold with the State of Israel. But in the face of genocide, so visible, so ostentatious, so live-streamed, these explanations fall short. My term as a special rapporteur, including the fierce opposition to my mandate, and this report in particular, reveals a darker truth. Some states support Israel to preserve their regional dominance, creating the material conditions that sustain its settler colonial project and make it succeed, in fact. And it's in this bigger scheme, a web of corporate actors are deeply enmeshed in the underlying economy, helping displaced indigenous Palestinians and replace them with Israeli settlers in what remains of their land. This report exposes the economic conditions driving and enabling Israel's machinery of displacement through destruction, segregation, and surveillance of the Palestinians, and replacement through the construction of alternative landscapes, economies, and realities for the settlers, their visitors, and associates. From arms manufacturers, tech giants, banks, energy firms, online platforms, supermarkets, and universities, corporate actors have supplied the tools, financing, and infrastructure, the legitimacy for this machinery of Eurasia. Weapons and data systems brutalized and surveilled Palestinians. Colonies spread, financed by banks and insurers, powered by fossil fuels, and normalized by tourism platforms, supermarket chains, and academic institutions. All have helped entrench apartheid and enabled the slow, inexorable destruction of Palestinian life. Corporate entities entangled in this ecosystem have long been on notice. Their products, services, and corporate relationships directly link them to an economy of occupation that has functioned in violation of peremptory norms, the Fourth Geneva Convention and the Rome Statute. Under the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, even this minimal connection triggers a clear responsibility to use their leverage to end abuse. But in this context of Palestine, we are not talking about isolated, specific incidents of wrongful conduct. The severity of the structural and sustained violations and crimes at issue has been confirmed by the International Court of Justice and has led to arrest warrants being issued by the International Criminal Court. In this context, what action could possibly be sufficient to rectify these violations and the corporate connections to them? The answer is simple. There is a prima facie responsibility on every state and corporate entity to completely abstain from or end their relationship with this economy of the occupation, especially as it has transformed into an economy of genocide. In the face of all this, too few have disengaged in the last 21 months. Armed companies have turned near record profits by equipping Israel with cutting-edge weaponry to unleash 85,000 tons of explosives, 6 times the power of Hiroshima, on Gaza. The companies provide dual-use infrastructure that is utilized as a weapon of mass targeting and killing. The machinery of the global construction equipment giants is raising Gaza to the ground, preventing the return and reconstruction of Palestinian life. Global energy conglomerates have fueled these assaults with coal, oil, gas, while the same infrastructure has been deprived to the Palestinians. No water, no electricity, creating the conditions of life calculated to destroy. While major global banks have underwritten and purchased Israeli treasury bonds, bankrolling the devastation at a time of gaping military budget deficits and plummeting credit rating. The 40 entities named in my report, alongside their parent subsidiary licensees and franchisees, are just the tip of the iceberg, illustrative of this system that entangles many, many more. What I exposed is not a list, it is a system, and it is to be addressed. Now, my expectation is that the OHCHR database, the Working Group on Business and Human Rights, and lawyers, investigative journalists, and prosecutors globally will take this framework and secure that what states have failed to achieve, accountability. And we must reverse the tide. As I conclude, let me say, member states must impose a full arms embargo on Israel, suspend all trade agreements and investment relations, and enforce accountability, ensuring that corporate entities face legal consequences for their involvement in serious violations of international law. And corporate entities must urgently cease all business activities and terminate a relationship directly linked, contributing to, and causing human rights violations and international crimes against the Palestinian people. At this existential moment for the Palestinian people, trade unions, lawyers, civil society groups, and ordinary citizens should encourage such behavioral change from the side of corporate entities and governments by pressing for boycotts, divestment, sanctions, and accountability. What comes next depends on all of us, and I truly believe that together we can make it. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. To thank very much all member states who took the floor. I cannot fail to acknowledge and express gratitude for the support expressed for this report and my mandate, support that really moves me deeply. It is reassuring against the pro-genocide voices that continue to infiltrate this room. The apocalypse we are watching in Gaza reveals the unhinged inhumanity of this propaganda. I have to say, this has been one of the most focused and substantive interactive dialogues I've experienced as a special rapporteur. I did not expect it, especially in light of the regrettable delay in the report's submission, for which I apologize. On that note, I must say, the continued funding of the United Nations and OHCHR by many member states will not serve justice or accountability and will not make our work speedier. These cuts do not reflect a lack of means, excellencies, but a shift in priorities toward rearmament. And this is alarming, and I sincerely hope that this course will be reconsidered and reversed. Now, going to the specifics of the question raised and considerations they triggered. Failing to diagnose, failing to cure. This is not a conflict. This is not a war. It's not an escalation of violence. It is intentional ethnic cleansing, which is entailing genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity in the meantime. Second point is that failing to plan is planning to fail. I hear that the two-state solution is the only solution. No, before this, the only solution is ensuring rights and freedoms for everyone between the river and the sea, which means end of the genocide now, end of the occupation by September this year, and end of the apartheid. This will be liberating for anyone in the land that they call home, for the Palestinians and Israelis, Muslim, Jews, Christians, atheists, everyone. Considering the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous that the state that is being accused of international crimes, including using starvation as a weapon of war, is given the responsibility to distribute aid to the Palestinians. It's a dead trap and must be stopped. The United Nations must regain control over humanitarian aid. Regarding alternatives that can be explored, I really commend the government of the state of Colombia and the state of South Africa for convening the Hague Group. This is the most relevant diplomatic and political development I've registered in the past 20 months. It doesn't make sense to resort to political discussion about a peace process that has not translated even in the recognition of the state of Palestine among some of you. So the emergency now, as these two states are proposing, and I hope that many of you will join, is to end the emergency in Gaza, end the blockade, end the occupation, and end the apartheid, but starting with the discussion on how to end the emergency. The substantive question on how states can strengthen due diligence in their own jurisdiction to have a corporate disengage from crimes. Strengthening human rights due diligence domestically implies establishing binding legal obligation requiring businesses to assess, act on, and report risks of involvement. However, under the guiding principles on business and human rights, there is the threshold for responsibility is a direct link between a company's operation and human rights violations. All companies I put on notice in preparation of my report go far beyond a mere link into active contribution. So the due diligence process must lead to action, and identifying risk is not sufficient. In the case of the occupied Palestinian territory, the violations are so grave, sustained, and structural that leverage is not just ineffective, it's meaningless. And at this point, the responsibility of those who continue to engage in businesses with the State of Israel become one of termination and disengagement and reparation. Continued corporate involvement legitimizes and normalizes a system found by the International Court of Justice to be unlawful, to be dismantled totally and unconditionally, and with the plausibility of genocide confirmed by the provisional measures and International Court of Justice and other crimes confirmed by the ICC arrest warrants, there is no alternative to this. Corporations who stay involved with intent, knowledge, and purpose must be held accountable. I want to conclude with one remark. As with reckonings that followed corporate complicity in apartheid South Africa and Nazi Germany, the apocalyptic situation in Palestine poses a defining test. Can global markets exist without enabling and profiting from injustice and impunity? Palestine today is a revealer, a mirror held up to the world's moral and political failure, and ending the genocide and ensuring this is the last crime the apartheid Israel commits against the Palestinians is a moral and legal obligation, and this requires not just outrage and condemnation, but rupture, reckoning, and the courage to dismantle what has enabled it. Thank you.
Tayab, I mean, Daniel mentioned that it's been 20 months, it's June 2025. I think what we, as normal people who see this, we probably think, how on earth are the Israelis getting away with this? Tell us what accountability, why it hasn't worked, will it work? Should any of us still kind of have any respect for this thing called international law? What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's really difficult for me to speak about law, especially the day when I drove to the Blackwall Tunnel without paying the £2.50 and got a £90 fine. The law was enforced pretty well that day. And when I was coming to this place and I was running late, and I thought, well, 70 miles per hour, does it really matter anymore? Shall I go 80, 90, 100? And I thought I better not, because the law will be enforced, and that's the point of the law. That's the point of the law. The point of the law is to regulate my activity, your activity. And the point of international law is to regulate in the activity of states. And I'm going to pick up on two things, or just what I said. World order has collapsed, I agree. But has it collapsed entirely, or is it just that we're seeing the way it was designed to be? And I think that's probably more accurate. And Daniel used the word zero sum, is that if we, and I say we, and I mean we because I live and I'm a British citizen in the West, if we kill all the Palestinians, because we're part of the enterprise, if we kill the Palestinians, what's the guarantee for Israelis that the same won't happen to them? Well, guess what it is? It's international law. And it's the world order, because if that starts to happen, you will see the strengthening of international law immediately. And you'll see accountability structures work instantly. And you'll see the world, the Security Council, move to prevent that from happening. And so what that teaches me as an officer of the court is that actually I live in the belly of the beast. We are the problem. And we are allowing our states to behave in the way that they're behaving. And there's a danger in that. And the danger in that is not just the breakdown of the world order or the rule of international law, but look what's happening in the United Kingdom right now. A group of people who formed a group called Palestine Action decided to take direct action to enforce the law through protest. And I say enforce the law because what they did was they saw their government not complying with their international obligations. And so they took direct action against this state in order to prevent this state, the United Kingdom, committing criminal acts by supporting Israel's genocide in Gaza. And the British government has decided to move forward and prescribe that organization. And that's an indicator that this state, the law within this state, is starting to break down. Because what you'll see happening, as almost guaranteed, is that Palestine Action will not be prevented from carrying out direct protest once it's prescribed. I can almost guarantee that, not because I have any special knowledge, but because what will have happened is that people will see the repressive nature of this state and other people will start to behave in the way that Palestine Action behaves. And sometimes people like me might decide, actually, I might as well go 100 miles per hour on the motorway because the law doesn't really matter anymore. And that's the danger. The danger is that the law will not just break down in terms of international law, but also domestically. And that's how violence starts on the ground. We've seen it before. It's not the first time. You see individuals that see, and I'm not justifying or explaining or excusing. No, I am explaining. I'm not excusing political violence, but I am explaining it. When a people feel that law isn't there to protect them, they turn to violence. Just turn to violence. You see that when people blow up trains, blow up buildings. It's because they feel that the law is not the answer for them anymore. And so they turn to violence. And this is really important because this is the way the international community is working right now. It's not turning to diplomacy or law or the Security Council for resolution. It's turning to violence. It takes action against the Palestinian people to eradicate them. It takes action against Iran to push back an apparent preemptive threat, which was unlawful. And so I'm just going to begin with Gaza and say this, okay? I am an officer of the Court of England and Wales, which means I have a duty to not mislead you. So I can say to you, much quicker than the International Court of Justice, it's my view that what Israel is doing in Gaza is clear genocide. It's clear genocide. The ICJ is a little bit behind me. I mean, they'll catch up, I'm sure. They consider it at the moment to be a plausible genocide, the actions that Israel is taking, but it's genocide. You don't kill that many people that rapidly in the way that Israel is doing without it being anything else. And it's part and parcel of a long-term, systematic attempt to eradicate the Palestinian people and subjugate them entirely. Now, the laws governing genocide, war crimes, and collective punishment and starvation are not ambiguous. They exist, they're strong, they're clear, they're excellent. Excellent. And I believe in those laws. I believe those laws, if they're applied properly, will protect people. But that's the greatest contradiction of our time today. It's not that the law is imperfect, it's that it's being misapplied and it's been selectively enforced by the West, the United Kingdom included in that. Keir Starmer specifically named in that. You know, he recently apologized for using a reference to strangers. I think in Gaza, there's only one word I want to hear from him in terms of the complicity that UK have played in terms of that genocide. And that's the word guilty when he's asked in a court of law. Because I think he is. I think he is guilty of complicity in the crimes of Israel. Now, this is the same legal system that actively, rapidly, and effectively prosecutes African leaders in The Hague, but shields Israelis and Western diplomats from any kind of accountability. What's happened is The law has been captured by the powerful, and it's being executed by them as part of their foreign policy engagement with Palestinians in the Middle East. That's what's really happening. And why I say that we're responsible for it, I know we don't want to be responsible for it, but we're in that beast. We seek comfort from it. I have an iPhone because of this. I have a car because of this. I have fuel in my vehicle because of this genocide. And that's what really this is. It's a part of the American, British, and Western empire exercising itself and stealing resources from other people and using genocide and ethnic cleansing to do that. And we see this most clearly in the hypocrisy surrounding the escalation with Iran. And I'm going to be blunt about this, and I've been blunt about it publicly already, but the coordinated attacks, whatever Trump pretends he's doing any given moment in time, whether he knows it himself or not, but they are coordinated. They are coordinated. And I feel quite comfortable in saying this because I called what Trump was going to do, what the United States were going to do. The coordinated attacks on Iran are unlawful. Article 2 of the UN Charter prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. There are only two legal justifications for the use of force: self-defense under Article 51 and authorization by the United Nations Security Council. And in the case of Iran, neither apply. Preemptive strikes dressed up as defensive responses do not satisfy the strict necessity and proportionality tests. There's no legal basis at all for those unilateral strikes by Israel or the United States on Iranian soil. There's no Security Council resolution or authorization, and there was no imminent attack. And whatever Israel and Western political commentators say about Israel's Iran's so-called proxies, well, that wasn't the justification given. Let's just remember that. It was the nuclear program or alleged nuclear program that was the justification. They can't change their mind after the fact. And it is interesting, and I'll probably go on a limb here because the Telegraph reported that the British Attorney General gave advice to the British government that the attacks were unlawful. And I would imagine that Richard Hermer, KC, who's the Attorney General, probably did give that advice, although it's not confirmed. And he gave that advice because guess what? Because the attacks on Iran were unlawful. Simple as that. Now, what do I think about Palestine and what's going on there? Well, I think Palestine has become the testing ground for global impunity. Every time the rules bend to shield Israel, every time accountability is deferred or denied, the precedent is set for lawlessness elsewhere. And it's the Palestinian people who are currently paying the price for this. And I just want to be honest about the title of this segment, is the shifting global dynamics. What do they actually mean? Well, we're not seeing a shift towards justice, that's for damn sure. We're seeing a shift to multipolar impunity, a shift in which powerful states discard legal obligations when inconvenient and punish the weak for insisting on their rights. And what does that equate to the people that are subjugated, the people that are oppressed? It's a clear message. It's a clear message. Unless you strengthen your ability to act in a violent way, you will have no answer because the law is not going to protect you. That's a zero-sum game, isn't it? That's a zero-sum game.
There's no hustle and bustle in the Jenin refugee camp in the northern occupied West Bank. Instead, there is this. Israeli forces bulldozing homes, clearing out streets and alleyways. Since the beginning of the year, hundreds of homes have been demolished in 3 refugee camps. Hundreds more are on their way to being completely destroyed. All part of Israel's longest and most destructive assault in the occupied West Bank in decades. But home demolitions are not limited to these refugee camps. On Wednesday, Israeli bulldozers razed a home in Na'alin village near Ramallah, a continued practice against Palestinians who don't have Israeli-issued building permits, which are rarely given. Israeli authorities only approved 1% of Palestinian building permit requests between 2016 and 2021, according to the Israeli rights organization, BIMCOM. Another Israeli tactic is demolishing the homes of Palestinians it accuses of attacking Israelis. The UN calls this policy collective punishment, and it's illegal under international law. In the southern occupied West Bank, nearly 1,200 Palestinians face potential displacement in Masafer Yatta. More than 500 of them are children. Israeli forces plan to demolish structures in 13 Bedouin communities. The reason given: existing buildings interfere with Israeli military training in the area.
We are very worried and anxious. I barely sleep at night. I also take my bed outside and sleep. Imagine, I don't stay in this cave with the rest of the family. In addition to the fear of demolition, I'm scared of settler attacks. They continue attacking us and stealing our livestock. They want to push us to leave one way or another.
Israel continues to further isolate and cut off Palestinian communities from each other, while expanding its illegal settlements. Palestinians say Israel's goal is clear: re-engineer the geography and structure of the entire occupied West Bank to pave the way for future annexation. Nida Ibrahim, Al Jazeera.
Let's discuss this further now with Alan Cohen-Lifshitz, who's an architect and urban planner for the Israeli NGO BIMCOM Planning and Human Rights. He's joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for your time on Al Jazeera, Alan. I understand you've been you've been approached to intervene in the demolition decision in Tulkarem today. Can you tell us more about this and more about what's motivating these orders, the demolitions of homes in Tulkarem and other areas of the West Bank?
Thank you. Actually, this case is unique in a way because usually we are not dealing with security demolitions. But however, we found out that actually there was not any check of the options within this area. The idea here is to expand the ways within the refugee camp so all this kind of army machine can go inside and do whatever they like. However, we found that there might be some options to reduce some of the demolitions.
So are these demolition orders part of a broader strategy of de facto annexation by Israel?
Okay, well, the case in Tulkarem refugee camp is a bit different. However, there is an idea to annex the West Bank, and we can see that in a way some of it is already ongoing. Especially in the issue of planning, since there are a lot of bylaws and plans and ideas that come from Israel directly to the West Bank. Moreover, we can see that there is a huge discrimination of Palestinian within the planning system.
Yeah, I want to ask you more about these laws in the planning system. I mean, it's widely reported that Palestinians face nearly impossible odds when trying to get building permits in Area C or in occupied East Jerusalem. Can you tell us more about the mechanisms behind the denial? Is there any real pathway for Palestinians to build legally in these areas?
For Palestinians, it's almost impossible to build legally. You report about the data that we have from 2016 till 21. And actually, we received a new data which actually reduced the number. So the percentage of Palestinians that receive building permits are 0.4 of the applications, 0.4% of the applications. So it's almost none, like 22 along 5 years. However, we need to understand that this is an area of conflict, and planning and the conflict is on land, and planning is a very powerful tool that Israel is using in order to create discrimination and to conquer. So actually what we can say is that planning and demolitions and all the idea of building are kind of weapon that Israel is using to conquer. We can see that there is a huge discrimination, or we can even say that it's in a kind of official apartheid between Israelis and Palestinians within Area C of the West Bank.
Okay, yeah, tell us more about this Area C. It makes up more than 60% of the West Bank and is under full Israeli control, if we understand it correctly. Why is it so important to Israeli authorities, this particular Area C? And what does it mean for Palestinians who currently live in this area?
So in Area C, we have all the settlements, and the administrative division of the Oslo Accord in 1995 and afterwards create a kind of fragmentation of the West Bank, which the main generator of this fragmentation were the settlements, the location of the settlements. And the idea of building the settlements in this position was not from a planning rationale, but from a different perspective to create a matrix of control all over the West Bank. So you have Area C, and which is, as you said, 60% of the West Bank, and areas A and B, which are around 40%, are actually islands within Area C. So all the movement of Palestinians and the livelihood is mainly related to Area C.
We've seen, Alan, an alarming rise also in settler attacks on Palestinian property, particularly since October 2023. Are these incidents part of an unofficial push to further displace Palestinians? I mean, and how does the Israeli army's presence intersect with that violence?
Well, for many years, we managed to prevent forcible transfer and demolitions of thousands of structures of Palestinians within Area C. Everything collapsed because we use the system, we work against the regime, against the authorities. However, these days, it's something that is beyond our capacity to deal with settlers, which nobody really care what they're doing, and even the government is pushing them, threatening them, giving them all the ability to do their job, and they are going hand in hand with the government. And the idea is to create an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in many areas in Area C. These days, we see that they are really going to the mainly to the mobile pastoralist communities, the Bedouin and non-Bedouin herding communities, which suffer most from these policies. And it's ongoing ethnic cleansing, and slowly they are going as well to villages and pushing villages that cannot really have access to Area C.
Thank you so much for talking to us about this and painting us a picture of what's been happening there in the occupied West Bank. Alan Cohen-Lifshitz, an architect and urban planner with the Israeli NGO BIMCOM Planning and Human Rights. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.
Their only hope lies beyond the mountains of shadow.